All right, we're going to get into Chapter 3, which is the U.S. private and public sectors. Chapter 3 is going to consider quite a few ideas. First of all, why did households go from self-sufficiency to relying on markets? Think Little House on the Prairie to today. How did firms evolve to take advantage of large-scale production? Remember, firms are businesses. How did they change to take advantage of making a lot of stuff all at once? Why do countries trade? If the invisible hand of competitive markets works so well, why must governments get into the act? Why do they have to do anything? Why are some people poor, even in the world's most productive economy? That'd be here in the U.S. Why do we have poverty level? Why do we have people who are considered poor, people who can't survive as well as others, even though our economy is so productive and so rich? And then how is poverty measured? Okay, jumping right in. So 3.1 talks all about the U.S. private sector. We're going to describe the evolution of households. We're going to explain the evolution of the firm, understand why international trade occurs. First of all, think about a boxed cake mix, okay? Just yesterday I made muffins for my family, and it was a muffin mix that I only had to add water to. I actually added milk to try to make them a little bit better, but you only have to add water. Everything else is in there. No eggs, no oil, no butter, nothing, just water. Why do we use those? Okay, what are the advantages offered to consumers by that boxed cake mix? Why are consumers much less self-sufficient than they were 100 to 150 years ago? How has the trend toward interdependency increased our nation's use of economic markets? And are there costs that we pay because of all of this? So we use boxed cake mixes because they're easy. They're foolproof. Almost anybody can make a cake with a boxed cake mix. You might just need some oil, some eggs, some water. You can mix it by hand. You don't even need a mixer for it. You'll need some pans and an oven. That's really it. And you can make yourself a pretty nice cake. That happens because we don't have chickens. I don't have chickens running around in my backyard that I can collect eggs from. I don't have I don't have oil in my backyard that I've processed from, grains. To make a cake, you'd have to get wheat, grind it, get cocoa, baking powder. I mean, there's just a lot of things that we don't have. We're not self-sufficient anymore. We work too much. We work outside the home. We spend our time doing other things to be self-sufficient. So that's our trend toward interdependency. That's why our nation uses economic markets to trade. And are there costs we pay? Yeah, we have to buy that cake mix. It's probably less healthy because there's more preservatives in it. Things like that. Okay, name the types of economic decisions you made yesterday and the firms you interacted with. Did any of the decisions involve the rest of the world? Okay, just think back to yesterday. You all went out to lunch. Yep, you did. So that was an economic decision. I don't know if that firm you interacted with involved the rest of the world or involved anybody outside the U.S. Maybe depending on what restaurant you went to, it involved people outside the U.S. I stopped and got gas yesterday. That was an economic decision. I spent my money. I picked which company I wanted to get gas from, and that decision did involve the rest of the world because the purchase of gas involves more than just the U.S. All right, so let's talk about the evolution of the household. The household is considered all those who live together under one roof. They are considered part of the same household. So no matter who is in your home, they are considered a household because a household makes certain decisions. Remember, about 50 years ago, most mothers did not work outside the home. This is no longer the case. In which ways has this trend changed the type of good and services households purchase? How have businesses changed in the way they operate? Which markets have grown? Are there markets that have diminished? Okay, when women left the home to go back to work, lots of things changed. First of all, let's see, I think there's more restaurants around on most every corner that you drive through. There's more fast food, slow food. If you walk through the grocery store or Sam's Club, there's more convenience food, stuff that you can just purchase and throw in your freezer and it's ready for you when you need it. Dry cleaners, many more dry cleaners because the women aren't home to wash and iron everything. What else? Childcare. Childcare wasn't necessary when the mothers stayed home because they took care of the kids. Markets that diminished? Maybe the hair salons where you sit under the dryers all day. Maybe those have diminished. Can't think of much else though. I mean, if anything, the markets have increased since women went back to work. Okay, think back to 1850. 2/3 of America's labor force worked on farms. Okay, the economy was primarily agricultural. Each farm household was largely self-sufficient. Individual family members specialized in specific farm tasks, either preparing meals, sewing clothes, tending livestock, growing crops, mending fences, etc. These households produced most of what they consumed and consumed most of what they produced. If they made it, they ate it. If they've got vegetable gardens, they're canning those vegetables so they can eat them all winter. They were very, very self-sufficient. Okay. Since then, we had the introduction of labor-saving machinery, disease-resistant seeds, better fertilizers. Farm productivity increased sharply because each farmer produced much more. Fewer farmers were needed to grow enough food to feed the nation. The growth of urban factories increased the demand for factory labor. Urban means city. So in cities where there's more population, factories were built, and that increased the demand for factory labor. So many workers and their families moved from farms to cities, where they worked in factories but became less self-sufficient. They're in the city now, so that you don't have the big farms, you don't have the vegetable gardens, you don't have cows and chickens in your backyards. So those families became less self-sufficient, and this is how the household is evolving. Right now, there's only about 2% of the U.S. labor force that works on farms. Still evolving, 1950, 15% of married women with children under 18 were in the labor force. Okay, today, about 50% of married women with children are in the labor force. So now we have double income households. More goods and services are purchased in markets. We talked about this a little while ago. We have childcare services, restaurants, dry cleaners. The rise of two-earner families has reduced the importance of specialization in household production. So two-earner families, they have more income, so they can pay for childcare services, go out to eat more, get their clothes laundered outside the home, etc. And that is the evolution of the household. We go from farms to urban factories to women working outside the home. Okay, households maximize utility. This word utility is very important. You're going to see it throughout your homework and your test. Utility means the level of satisfaction, the level of happiness, the sense of well-being. As human beings, we all try to maximize our utility at all times. And that's what it's called. It's called maximizing our utility. It's our level of satisfaction, our happiness, our sense of well-being. Each household pursues this. Each household works very hard to maximize utility. I guess I'm working from the slide down up. So there are 116 million households in the U.S. Each is considered a single decision maker. Each household pursues rational self-interest. We talked about rational self-interest back in Chapter 1. And, sorry, I lost my notes. There we go. Rational self-interest is maximizing our, minimizing cost. Minimizing cost. I don't think it's happiness. Maximizing our happiness, that word's not quite right. I'll look it up. Minimizing our cost. One second. Maximize benefit, minimize cost to you. Maximize benefit, minimize cost to us. That's rational self-interest. Okay? So each household pursues rational self-interest, maximizing our benefit, minimizing our cost to us. And this is a personal decision, just like maximizing utility is a personal decision. Okay, learning objective 2, explaining the evolution of the firm. A firm is an economic unit formed by profit-seeking entrepreneurs who combine resources to produce goods and services, and they accept the risk of profit and loss. So a firm is a business, remember? Walmart is a firm. Walmart is a business. What led to the development of the firm as we know it today? How did it evolve? So evolution of the firm, we've got specialization and comparative advantage help explain why households are no longer self-sufficient. Why is the firm the natural outgrowth to our households being less self-sufficient? For example, rather than make a woolen sweater from scratch, couldn't a consumer take advantage of specialization by hiring someone to produce the wool, another person to spin the wool into yarn, and a third to knit the yarn into a sweater? Why is the firm even necessary? Well, that model doesn't work. If the consumer had to visit and make agreements with each of these specialists just for one sweater, the resulting transaction costs, which is the cost of time and information, could easily erase the efficiency gained from specialization. Instead of visiting and dealing with each specialist, the consumer can pay someone else to do this. The consumer can pay an entrepreneur to hire all the resources necessary to make the sweater. Okay? An entrepreneur, by hiring specialists, may make many sweaters rather than just one, is able to reduce transaction cost per sweater and increase his income, his revenue. So that's just crazy. So here we have households, self-sufficient. They can do everything themselves. They're making their own clothes. They're making their own food. Okay, the evolution of the firm, the households moved into what's called the cottage industry. It's based, a system developed in the British Isles, where workers' rural cottages served as tiny factories. Production usually occurred during the winter months when farming tasks were few, so the opportunity cost for farm workers was lower. The cottage industry system still exists in some parts of the world. You can view this system as the bridge between the self-sufficient farm household and the modern firm. So households moved to cottage industry, and the cottage industry moved to the factory. Okay, factory being the most efficient way to produce lots of goods. And this leads us into the Industrial Revolution. We're going to skip that for a second. The Industrial Revolution. So in the 18th century, technological developments, being water power and steam power, pushed the Industrial Revolution to really start. Great Britain, 1750 was the start of the Industrial Revolution. So specialization, the economy expanded in the 18th century. Entrepreneurs began organizing the stages of production under one factory roof. There were lots of technological developments, and we have shift employment. They contributed to the shift of employment from rural farm to urban factory. There are 4 work organized in large centrally powered factories in 4 different ways. We have a promotion of more efficient division of labor. We have an allowance for the direct supervision of production. And we have got a reduction in transportation costs. And this all facilitated the use of specialized machines for larger than anything that had, far larger than anything that had been used in the home. Okay, and these firms maximize the profit. Okay, you need to know this equation right here for your homework and your test. So bringing everything under a factory maximized profits. Those entrepreneurs accept the risk of a profit and the loss. Just as households attempt to maximize utility, firms attempt to maximize profit. Profit is the entrepreneur's reward for accepting the risks involved. So here in the U.S., we've got 30 million profit-seeking firms. 2/3 of them are small retail businesses and small service operations and part-time home-based businesses and small farms. Each year, more than 1 million new businesses start and just as many go out of business. So despite challenges, the lure of profit provides entrepreneurs the incentive to keep trying. Okay, why do we trade? Why do countries trade? The rest of the world affects what U.S. households consume and what firms produce. Foreign decision makers have a significant effect on the U.S. economy. So international trade, that's trade between countries, we understand why households stopped trying to do everything for themselves and began to sell their resources to specialized firms. They just couldn't do it all themselves, so they sold their resources, the resources being their human capital, maybe what they were producing on their farm, etc. So they started to sell their resources to specialized firms. Well, gains from international trade occur because the opportunity cost of producing specific goods differs across countries. Think about the U.S. If we were responsible for providing the entire world with the amount of bananas we eat, we would fail miserably because the U.S. isn't made for making bananas. Other parts of the world are made for that. So the rest of the world affects what U.S. households consume and what U.S. firms produce. For example, firms in Japan and South Korea supply U.S. markets with autos, electronic equipment, and other goods, thereby affecting U.S. prices, employment, wages, and profit. So that's why we trade. The rest of the world consists of the households, firms, and governments in the more than 200 nations throughout the world. We're going to skip that, sorry. So as the U.S., we buy from other countries. We buy crude oil, metals, and coffee beans. We buy finished goods. I'm sorry, I was interrupted. So as the U.S., we also buy finished goods, being cameras, DVD players, automobiles, like I said. As a U.S. international trader, we sell to other countries computer hardware, computer software, aircraft, movies. Our entertainment industry is pretty big. And then raw materials, mostly agricultural products. In 1970, only about 6% of U.S. production was sold to other countries. Today, it's 12%. 12% we trade to other countries. And here's a video. It's on your YouTube playlist. I would recommend watching it. It's about terms of trade with China and the U.S. I don't know why I went back there. And then trade in raw materials. If production exceeds consumption, we get rid of the excess and we sell it to other countries. If production is less than consumption, so if the U.S. produces less of what it consumes, less than it consumes, Americans buy the difference from other countries because we're considered the breadbasket of the world. If we look here, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Yep. U.S. production is a percent of U.S. consumption. So we only produce 1% of the coffee that we consume. And we do consume a lot of coffee. We all do our part in that one. So we need to import the rest of our coffee. But cotton, we produce 357% of the amount of cotton that we produce. Way too much. So we trade this off to other countries. And then we have everything in between, because we are the breadbasket of the world. Okay, and that is it for 3.1.